So see the players getting shuffled up. I know Howie was thinking a lot about grief and whether to play that today, and chose not to. I believe copying, maybe not copying, but talking. I seriously referred him to Ryan and was like, "Hey, like I know Ryan plays a lot of Living End, so message him, see what his thoughts are." And Ryan mentioned that this deck looks very similar to his. So
Yeah, I think Grief is in this interesting spot where it is a very good card and rips apart some decks that you want to slow down significantly. Burn comes to mind as a big one. But I think once you lose the cards you find in Scam, it really needs to be something that is facilitating your combo, not something you want to do proactively. And I think that for that reason, you probably want to lean towards somebody that kind of leans into that slower, more deliberate game plan.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping this should be a pretty solid match. I mean, I think Living End does a really good job extending the game going long, but Jund is the deck that, it's kind of, at one point, at least in time, was the kingpin of late game, taking over with a Raging Ravine or a Tarmogoyf or something like that, buying back your resources with Kolaghan's Command. So I think in this situation, you see Howie being the kind of the beatdown, Jund kind of working as a control list, and Howard's going to try to close this game out sooner than later, hoping that we can kind of negate the long-term big body advantage you find in Jund.
Yeah, yeah. So it does look like both players took a mulligan, chose a card to put on the bottom, and Jeremy got the die roll starting with a Ragavan.
Ragavan turn 1 versus Living End is such a backbreaker, not because of the damage. The damage is obviously not a bad thing, but being able to make treasures and apply pressure a little faster definitely helps Jeremy close the door and provide answers to Howard's game plan.
We might be able to deploy another threat and Thoughtseize Howard this turn, which be very impactful.
Be very huge.
So we see, I believe that's a Boseiju get played, and we pay 3 mana for a Grist, the Hunger Tide.
Grist isn't like fantastic here. Definitely not the worst. It awkwardly has this weird synergy where you want to mill things anyways, and you end up making bodies. So before Living End, you at least have something to apply pressure. But post Living End, hopefully you have enough things stocked up in your graveyard that you can ultimate it and clean up the rest of the game from there.
I think it's also just like a removal spell that you pay for before Living End resolves, and then you get to cash it in, and kill one of the things that your opponent got back. Looks like Howie did draw his card, play a land, pass it back, and Jeremy's fast into the red zone.
Yeah, exiling the Colossal Whale there is not what you're looking for, but it's something. I mean, I think Inquisition here, at least getting rid of that, I think the only Cascade spell in the hand for Howie, that's really the reward there. That's really nice.
Howie keeping Street Wraith, I think correctly assessing that, he's probably going to get hand disruption spelled at some point, and so just hold the Street Wraith until that happens, because if you hit your only Cascader, then you want to protect it from Thoughtseize.
So, Jeremy doesn't necessarily know this yet. I'm cycling it now, but holding that as your only black card in hand means that there might be a grief coming. So, Jeremy might have something that he wants to save for post, right, in his hand, post Living End, but he might deploy a little earlier just because, it might get discarded by a grief. So, I like actually holding it there, especially since it's a free cycling cost. But looks like he cycled instead.
Whoa, and I was gonna say how impactful it was that Howie got to cycle like 3 times, because you're like, oh, only Cascade spell. There were 3 new cards, but we didn't draw the Cascade spell. We drew the one we wanted to cascade into.
Yeah, and this is really awkward too, because the deck normally does not play all 4 copies of Living End. You normally play 3. Howie himself is playing 3 copies. Having 2 in the deck means that unless you have, some way to get him shuffled back into your deck, maybe Jeremy has a copy of Endurance in the deck. Once again, Jeremy doesn't. But there's a good chance that Living End just rots away in this hand for the rest of this game.
Yep. And then if we get to the point where Howard needs to resolve a second living end to get a battlefield to actually win the game, it's just not in his deck.
No, it's not. So you're gonna have to be very strategic for when you actually do cast this initial one, because once again, you're not getting a second one.
Yeah. I think this is Jeremy casting his opponent's violent outburst from the top of the library.
The hits can be middling, right? But I mean, I think at the very least, getting a lightning bolt definitely turns this from a 2-turn game to a 1-turn game. So I'm happy with that overall.
And Howard's still gonna fetch his land out, do a cycle, and hope to find a cascade spell, because that's what we need to keep in the game here.
Yeah, hopefully you find a violent outburst. I mean, it's really a shame that you end up losing that violent outburst you really wanted to the top of the deck from the Ragavan. But you are hoping to find something, ideally, I think at instant speed, in case there is a second Ragavan from Jeremy, that you can put onto the battlefield.
Howard untaps, takes draw step. Thinking about playing the land. Misty Rainforest for turn.
We got a reader.
Make sure he knows what Grist does.
Well, it's funny too, because like there are some cards that like it's really the extra text. Like no one's playing Grist for the ultimate ability. You're playing it for the +1. You're playing it for the -2. Both very impactful. The ultimate obviously happens less frequently than either of those two abilities, but even when you have the option to do it, it doesn't normally get activated. Usually, you keep applying pressure. You keep removing threats from the board. But it's a real threat at this point, right? You might actually die to that trigger if you cast Living in the wrong spot. I'm not sure what the creature count is for Jeremy at this point. I believe it's just 1. But you combine that with a Ragavan in the graveyard, then we're at 2, and suddenly it's more problematic. It looks like he has the outburst in hand, so
okay,
it is something he needs to be aware of.
Just thinking about the correct time to cast it for Howard.
Yeah, I think there are definitely some. I understand wanting to cast it right now, while there's no potential threats, anything like that. But I think you do need to try to do this during combat in case there is a dashed Ragavan. I don't think there's going to be anything problematic that's going to happen at instant speed that you are really worried about. I think you're just trying to make sure you fog for this turn and save. You're already at 5 life. You're very easily dead to Bloodbraid Elf or something like that.
And that's what we see here. Jeremy attacks, and Howard cascades.
I always love the long wait to find the cards. Like, I do play this, I swear. It's in here.
And especially, we might even expect this to be long because we know there's only one copy that we're going towards in our deck. So Jeremy's going to be forced to sacrifice all the bug tokens and the monkey. And I can't tell whether there's a creature in his graveyard. I don't think there actually is.
Oh, it's not, no. So it looks like we're going to get a bunch of cards back from Howard. But Jeremy's going to be sitting on an empty battlefield after getting fogged. Grit is going to be able to do basically nothing here, right? I mean, you've got a lot of power you're dealing with here. Even a couple terminates. It's not going to be enough, I think, to finish this game for Jeremy.
Yeah. This looks like 10, 12, 16, 19, 27 power from Howard, if my math's right.
Oh, well, I mean, we add a Grist. That does a little bit, right? It blocks the Striped Winder. So now instead of lethal, you're at, what, like 3 or something like that? It's something, but I don't even know what the extra turn gets you. I think Jeremy does have a lightning bolt right now, so at least puts in a position to top deck and be able to get out of this.
Or land and then Bloodbraid Elf into bolt.
Yeah.
After Howard swings the team, but I trust Howard to cover his outs as well.
There's that Ragavan we were talking about before. If you try to do this during your main phase, maybe it's a, I guess, negligible difference here, but I think it's good to have that. I think I actually might have kept that in my hand if I were if I were Jeremy, try to obscure how much damage you actually have the potential to put out next turn. Might elicit a bad attack.
Yeah.
And now I think Howard's a little more incentivized to leave some blockers back.
I think there's a potential that Jeremy was just dead with one blocker. My math was 27 and Striped Wood Rewinder is 6. So I think he actually has to block 2 things here.
I think if so, I mean, I guess you have the ability to block that and the Street Rate.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that I guess would prevent lethal. So what? 8, 10. Yeah, I think those are 3, so 16. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Howard's cycling a card and getting 2 Curator of Mysteries triggers. So Curator says whenever you cycle, you scry one, and Howie's got 2 of them in play. So he scried one twice, and then is resolving the cycle.
I'm not sure what you're looking for if you're Howard. I mean, you've obviously got the battlefield already. You don't really have interaction. I think the best thing for you would be like Brazen Borrower, being able to bounce a potential blocker, get that out of the way, and actually crash in for lethal. Past that, I'm not even sure if there's anything I'm really, really interested in.
Yeah, I think figuring out exactly how many to attack with. But I think he's getting the answer of everything.
Which might be right, honestly. I think you're in this spot, but Jeremy does know there's no more. I mean, more than likely knows that there's no more living ends in the deck, so you're not going to get ambushed by anything. The only blocker you would be afraid of here would be an Endurance potentially, or a Brazen Borrower. Brazen Borrower not going to block these creatures on the ground. If you are able to dash through a Ragavan, unless there's an Endurance coming or a Subtlety, the game's going to be over. So. I think you have to, if you're Jeremy, try to line up a block that at least puts you in a position, if it exists, that you can kind of sneak this game through. But I guess it depends on how this goes here.
It's kind of looking like that Waker is in play, but it's not. That is the Exile Zone.
Yeah, this blocks become a lot easier if the Waker's in play. At that point, you're just like, yep, scoop him up, let's go. But I think as is, I do think you're in this interesting spot, and it looks like he's trying to attack the Grist, which, obviously a huge boon for Jeremy, right? That's some extra time that you could potentially extend this game. But I'd be interested if he actually attacks the Grist. I just think, and in this board, I think it provides very little value. If you're going to leave back a blocker, I think it makes a little bit more sense to get that off the board and protect your blocker there. But I think if you're planning on doing this attack like this, I don't think you need to attack Grist. I actually think I wouldn't even attack with all my creatures. I think you just 10 you in the air, and move on from that.
The one thing that's hitting me that Howard might be playing around is exactly Grist Ultimate plus Bolt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we attack, and yeah, so that would put Ragavan in the graveyard. That's the second creature. It would be exactly 5. Yeah.
So maybe just using Grist or hitting Grist down. So below, I guess that's 5 is the ultimate, or so hitting it down to at least 4. Going that route would be decent. But one thing, if we're doing this, I mean, it still, I guess, is an option, but it does look like Jeremy is trying to line up blocks with the intention of keeping Ragavan alive here. And knowing that, he has a Lightning Bolt in hand, that makes a lot of sense here if Howard doesn't have a blocker.
Yep. And yeah, so I believe Jeremy figuring out that he's forced to block with the Ragavan, but that doesn't if something went at the grist, he would not be forced to block with the Ragavan.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there was some verbal communication that we kind of missed, that he's not sending it at the Ragavan or at the grist.
There's definitely a chance here. It looks like the lightning bolt is going at one of the creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay. So maybe I'm interested to see if there is something verbal that we're missing here. I feel like the damage isn't lethal. I think you are okay. 26 power. Okay. So you have to block at least one creature, deal with another one.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. But now if Howie doesn't have interaction, he would just... Well, I guess he's not just dead to Ragavan hit plus grist ult.
I don't think that's gonna do it.
Yep. Believe this is Jeremy scooping him up.
Yeah.
Realizing he's dead.
Yeah, really tough spot there. I mean, I think Howie obviously got very unlucky hitting both the living ends there, but being able to actually apply pressure like that in a way that allows the deck to be so advantaged in being able to end the game in one turn, potentially making all the resources get lost by the Jund deck. I think it's kind of what you want here. Obviously, there are a lot of cards, especially post board, that are going to be able to greatly affect things like that. So putting the Jund deck in the position where you got one turn, have fun. I think it's a really good strategy, and obviously it worked out for Howie. So great.
Yeah. And from my time playing Jund, this is not a matchup that was very enjoyable. They just needed to resolve the living end one time, and it's just how impactful living end is once you've committed to being just a regular old Magic deck. I've got spells and creatures and interaction, and I'm going to try to attack you. It's exactly what living end's good against. So, looking at Jeremy's sideboard then, it looks like I would probably want even more 1-mana disruption spells. So notably, Jeremy has 8 copies in his main deck, 4 Inquisition and 4 Thoughtseize, and then a 9th one in his sideboard from the Duress. Does look like we also have 2 Leyline of the Void and Ashiok Dreamrender that'll be wonderful here, and the Nihil Spellbomb.
Yeah, those definitely having discard spells for the deck I think is really nice. Duress is kind of awkward though because it doesn't actually hit the Shardless Agent, it just hits the Violent Outburst, which is definitely the better of the 2 Cascade spells in the deck. But, the fact it's, not actually, it is a creature, right?
Yeah.
Makes that actually really good in this matchup. So I'm not sure about the Duress here, but I do love the Nihil Spellbomb. I think that's fantastic. That's an easy addition. Layla of the Void, obviously. Ashiok, obviously. I'm not sure if there's anything else from the sideboard I'd want to add in. I could understand at least wanting to bring in Terra Sunder if you see like a Leyline of Sanctity out of the living end deck that does come in sometimes for them. But I think until then, just the hard and easy graveyard hate cards I think are where you want to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about Howie?
Howie gets some things here. I mean, it is kind of awkward with some of these cards. Like I do like things like Endurance, I think are fine, but they're not fantastic. I think being able to shuffle your cards back into your library is actually meaningful. And also it does Shrinkage Tarmogoyf for things like that. So that might be something to kind of go forward with. Brazenbauer does actually buy you a decent amount of time as well, but I'm not sure how great that actually is going to be long term. So that's something I'm kind of about. I do like the Nimble Obstructionist, as awkward as it sounds, just because you expect the Nihil Spellbomb to come in. So being able to counter that seems like a really kind of cute way, I guess. But it's an interesting way to get away around one of the graveyard interaction points that you kind of expect out of a Jund deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. So, but it seems like we really just want Howie to try to do his thing, and he only needs to get one of these next 2 games to get the match. So it's on Jeremy to have the graveyard interaction and have his deck do its thing.
And it was especially being on the play, winning game 1. Howard is in such a good position because, maybe you don't win game number 2. Maybe that doesn't go your way. being on the play for game number 3, though,
Mm-hmm.
I like Howard's chance of taking this match overall at this point after taking like the first game.
Absolutely.
You can really only hope that Jeremy does end up with some amount of graveyard hate, some pressure. I mean, Ragavan, I think, was very good in that game, and we kind of saw the impact it had up until that last, few turns once the graveyards got flipped. Ragavan is a very good turn 1 threat for Jeremy, and I think you want to keep a hand that's that combined with maybe there's a turn 0 ley line, maybe there's a Nihil Spellbomb, but something that you can continue applying pressure while still being able to deal with the graveyard situation, make Howie use his resources to try to find some way to get that off the battlefield. In the meantime, just knock him down to the point where this painful fetch land, shock land mana base is going to put Howard in a situation where the Grist or Lightning Bolt, or maybe a hasted Bloodbraid Elf is able to close out the game.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I was going to note there while the players were shuffling up is that they had both taken a mulligan in game 1, which I feel greatly favors Howard.
Yeah, I think so too. One thing I think if we're going to play a 0 resource game, Howard's top decks are just better and more impactful. I mean, obviously Jeremy does have things that are bigger haymakers, but Howard literally just sees more cards.
Yes.
And I think being able to just chain together 2 or 3 cycling spells, even if it doesn't get you the cascade spell you're looking for, at least you're stocking up, making it more powerful, and getting to the interaction pieces a little faster, as opposed to finding a Tarmogoyf or finding a Liliana of the Veil that might not do what you're looking for.
Yep. So, yeah, Jeremy just really wants to be resource heavy. That's or at least heavier than Howard.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jeremy did take a mulligan, but started on that ley line, as you said, and a Ragavan on 1. So
that's like the perfect start for Jeremy here. That's what you're looking for. And now he can attack in and get treasures and start applying some more threats.
Ooh, but Howard, I believe, fetching and shocking and deading the Ragavan.
And I don't think I like Dead Gone a ton in this matchup, but in this spot, it's very good, right? Ragavan's one of the most impactful cards, I think, if it continues to connect, and getting off the battlefield alleviates a lot of pressure for Howard.
Absolutely. So Jeremy's just got a tap land then, and I think might be sending it back, just waiting for Howard to shuffle. And Howard making sure to show that his Dead Gone is firmly in exile.
Yes, for better or worse. Make sure that's not a point of confusion. Especially because he does have the ability to shuffle things back into his deck with endurance. If that's in there, you want to make sure it's clearly in exile, not in the graveyard.
And I do believe in Howie that he's got the answer in his deck to this Leyline of the Void, even other than Brazen Borrower, just to keep it out of play for a turn. But I bet you he's got that Foundation Breaker in his deck.
Yeah, Foundation Breaker definitely seems like it'd be something huge here if it's able to come in. And I think it's actually really nice too, being able to have something that you can, I don't want to say cast proactively, but its interaction with Spellbomb is very nice, and in Leyline too, where you can destroy it and then put it in the graveyard from the its ability. So something you can buy.
Grist the Hunger Tide on his 3rd turn, and then Howie fetching out a shock land and taking his turn 3.
Once again, just developing a solid board, being able to apply pressure. Once again, that Leyline of the Void's doing a lot of heavy lifting here. So you're hoping to just continue this, make Howard continue searching for threats, all the while cycling away into the Void all your cycling spells that you want to bring back.
Right, exactly. They are going to the wrong spot. But it does look like Howard just boarded in his endurances, or at least this one copy. So he's just gonna flash endurance in and be ready to block an insect.
Yeah, I think that's solid. I mean, once again, you're expecting some amount of graveyard hate from your opponent. So if you're able to clean up their graveyard, it does kill Tarmogoyfs and things like that potentially. Also, just being able to have a blocker that you can actually cast relatively early. I mean, a lot of the other spells that you cast in the deck are 4 drops or 5 drops. It's only 3 mana. So it is something you can use as an early blocker for those Rakazans and Dark Confidants.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if Howard just kind of in sideboarding turned his deck into like blue-green flash with a bunch of cycling and maybe some living ends that you might plan to use. And then you're just kind of trying to play cards with your Jund opponent.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is that you do have a lot of flyers, which Jund does not deal with particularly well. So, transitioning into that deck that is able to actually attack profitably is really nice.
And then ideally, your opponent's drawing a bunch of graveyard hate that just doesn't impact your game plan as you put the flash sets in play.
Yeah.
So we saw a Windcaller even get cycled, giving the Endurance flying, and then attack the Grist, I believe putting it down to 3, and then Jeremy's just gonna, on his turn, trade some Grist counters and the bug with an Endurance.
This hand is not what you want if you are Howie. You've got Living End, which is not great right now. You've got Shardless Agent, also not great right now. The really thing you're hoping to keep is that Striped Winder, and that is going to be in exile as well. So, I mean, your hand is basically just nothing at this point.
Yep. But we are tapping 4 mana for a Curator of Mysteries off the top and playing a tapped Breeding Pool.
It's a fantastic top deck. I mean, it's an evasive threat. You don't have to pay any more mana or any more life into it, so you don't have to shock your land into play. Lets you develop the board, hopefully find some more threats in the next couple turns.
And then in Jeremy's upkeep, he revealed an Inquisition of Kozilek to the Dark Confidant. So he will take 1. And then pretty quickly activated the Grist in his main phase to make a bug.
I'm not sure if Jeremy's thinking about this, but I'm very interested in using Inquisition to get rid of the Shardless Agent, not worry about it later. Especially if you're going to have that Tarmogoyf there. It's a really good way to make sure that the hand is clean as possible.
Looks like Jeremy has a different plan for the Inquisition and passes it back after playing the turn. Howard drew, and this Curator of Mysteries play is exactly why I think Howard might have boarded in the Endurances and the Subtleties. You just get to a point where you play out your lands, and then you draw a 4/4 flyer for 4 mana, and you put it in play against your Jund opponent.
Yeah, and sometimes that's good enough. It very easily can get out of control, and you're hoping that a 4/4 flyer is good enough to close out this game, and in limited it is. In some lower power formats like a standard, it might be good enough. Not this current standard format, that's a mess, but in some it's solid. And honestly, being able to keep the planeswalkers off the board, like you've got to deal with Grist, you got to deal with Lily Out of the Veil. Being able to get over and hit them in the air is really nice.
A little bit worried about Howie's life total, though. We kill a planeswalker, growing the Tarmogoyf.
Yeah.
And Jeremy's got 4, 5, 6, 7 power, so 2 turns.
Yeah, it's losing on the board, currently losing in the card advantage front too. It's very difficult to expect Howie to be able to win this game from this spot. But we've seen crazier things happen. So, I don't want to necessarily count them out, but like you're gonna need a combination unlike I've ever seen, I think, if you're gonna win this game from here.
So looks like the plan for those hand disruption spells was for them to become elementals.
Which I think is valid. I still would think I want to get rid of the Cascade spell just in case, but I definitely respect keeping them as discard fodder. The attack is interesting. It might just be like a glorious concession, though.
Or we're gonna Living End for no value.
That would be a really nice way to clean up the board here.
I do believe that's what we're gonna look at here. Unless we just don't have a Violent Outburst.
If not, this is the best slow roll.
Right, Howie? Don't keep us waiting like this. There we go. Cascade trigger.
And this is definitely one of the underrated things about this deck too. Like, if the board position really becomes that bad, you do have that option just to say, well, let's just try this again.
Mhm.
The downside here, though, is that Jeremy actually does have some cards in the graveyard. I think if you knew that this was coming, the Season Pyromancer might have discarded like another creature.
Mhm.
But I mean, discarding the discard spells, I think, is perfectly fine overall. But Jeremy's going to be able to actually still apply a decent amount of pressure even post Living End. So this buys Howard a turn, but it's not the end all be all here.
Yep. So we see the Living End go to resolve. It looks like Jeremy gets both a Seasoned Pyromancer and a Grist the Hunger Tide, because that's a creature in your graveyard.
It is a creature in the graveyard. There are so many interesting interactions with Grist that I'm like, that doesn't. Oh gosh, no, I'm dead. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Grist
being a creature obviously relevant in things like Greenback Yawgmoth, where you can get it with Court of Calling.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen elves get it with Natural Order. But in this deck, it does come back if you happen to have it from a Living End. So I'm sure that was good deck building. But there's a heads up thing from Jeremy being aware of that. I think a lot of players would have overlooked that interaction.
I'm about to go into the lab and make like a Jund Living End deck where you just like Season Pyromancer on 3, trade your thing, block after discarding your Grist, and then you Violent Outburst them.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the strategy. I like that.
Oh my gosh. I've been embarrassed trying to spell pierce a Grist multiple times, so I did not think about how it comes back from a Living End. That's beautiful. And we see the Living End to wipe the board not quite be good enough there because it didn't wipe the board.
No, I mean, once again, you get in this position where if you can't deal with that initial thing, and you saw that Leyline of the Void come down on turn 0, and Howard never found a way to deal with it. And by the time he potentially could have, maybe Brazen Borrowed isn't really a good enough answer. Like a Foundation Breaker would have been a really great addition, but honestly, I didn't even think to put it in the deck. I mean, I'm assuming a little more experience. Howie probably knows this is a card you need to bring into this matchup. But if you don't, you're just drawing dead the whole time.
Yeah, I think also maybe he is just nervous that he doesn't know exactly what kind of interaction Jeremy's going to have. Maybe he has a bunch of Ashioks instead, but he's kind of split. And so now Howie's like, okay, I half boarded with a bunch of flash threats. Now I'll really board to have the Foundation Breaker and Force of Vigor to kill your late line. So
yeah, like I like Subtlety overall, and Subtlety is a very, very nice way to deal with something like a Scavenging Ooze, or deal with like an Ashiok, right? Being able to put that back on top. But if you're hedging that way and you're like, okay, well, they definitely have Spellbomb, they definitely have Ashiok, I'll do with those two. Then you see that as the ley line, you're like, okay, so I boarded it wrong. So they definitely have Spellbomb. They always have Spellbomb. They have Leyline, so they probably don't have Ashiok anymore. So I don't have to worry about that now. So I could be wrong too, but I wouldn't be shocked if we don't see the subtleties in game number 3 here, but we do see the Foundation Breakers in, and now, still fighting a good fight. And I think bringing in cards that are meaningful in the matchup, but you can't bring in too many cards as Living End, because if you dilute your strategy too much, that you're not doing anything.
Yep. So one thing that is now an additional little bit of text popping out to me about the Grist there is that you can also tutor it off of effects that like check power toughness.
Yeah.
So like you can imp recruiter this. Imperial recruiter, you can or in Legacy like Recruiter of the Guard. There's other ones in Modern too.
I've seen people get this back off of Netherall, I think it's called. It's like a mutate creature.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
So there are definitely some very interesting lines you can get with Grist, and I think it's another one of those cards. I think that Modern Horizons 2 is filled with so many powerful cards. Like, I think Modern Horizons 1 did a good job of kind of masking what cards were powerful and why they were powerful. But Modern Horizons 2 just punches you in the face with so many things. You already had, the Solitude. We've seen, Fury. We've seen Subtlety, all those things. Obviously Ragavan and, DRC and Murktide. Grist is one of those cards that just like, the more you read it and the more you interact with it, you're just like, I'm just shocked how good this card is. And I'm not surprised that it made its way into Jund, that it's in Green Black Yawgmoth. Even a little less played, but there's like that Cart the Lion deck as well. It's just a really powerful card that ties together a lot of these strategies while doing a lot of diverse things, being tutorable in a lot of decks. Elves isn't used to having a tutorable kill spell in Legacy or in Modern, but this is that card. It just happens to line up pretty well in a lot of these metagames.
Absolutely. Exciting. So, heading over to our game 3. Players drawing their first opening hands. Believe Howie will be on the play. Looks like he's taking a mulligan.
Yeah, I think the Living End deck does mulligan pretty well. So I think you're pretty comfortable, especially being on the play, mulliganing down to a decent 4 if you need to, especially if that means you get a Foundation Breaker to deal with a potential Leyline of the Void or something like that. I do also want to add into the Grist lore that it were. If you've ever seen the Changeling deck,
Okay.
there's a deck that plays like 5-color Changelings, and you play like I'm trying to even think what's in there. There's the Realm Walker, which is that green one from Kaldheim. You have the my arch nemesis. I forget what it's called. The blue-white Changeling. The
Unsettled Mariner.
Yes, I hate that card. It is my least favorite sliver, I think. But it just shows up everywhere. Obviously humans play that card a lot as well. But that's definitely a card that people will +1 Grist and mill that, and I'm like, that's weird. And they do it again. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna die to this now. They make like 4 insects because they're just milling Changelings the whole time.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So it looks like we are off to our game here. Howard kept 6, put a card on the bottom, played a Spire Bluff Canal, and sent it back over. Jeremy played the Blackleaf Cliffs, thought seized to see a Cascade spell, and then 3 1-mana cyclers and a 0-mana cycler.
And looking at Howard's hand too, this definitely seems like kind of what we're looking for, where you have a low resource hand in terms of lands, but you have enough cycling to get through your deck. You had 3 cards you would actually just cycle. You have the Street Wraith, and that eventually will hopefully draw you into that land that you need to actually cast that.
Moment of truth. Oh, and this is definitely one of the fail cases that Potter discussed earlier when we were talking about Living End, that you just got to get to 3 lands, and mulliganing is something that, like, we saw the hand at Spire Bluff Canal, Street Wraith, 3 1-mana cyclers, and a Violent Outburst. You're going to keep that. You're not going to mulligan that, but it is going to lose if you just don't hit the land in the top 5 cards.
Yeah, and the nice thing is, maybe Jeremy is slow rolling it here, but like there's no spell bomb here, right? So I think even missing it, it's not like you're being punished for this. If a Leyline comes down there and exiles Howie's Graveyard, way in the back foot, much harder game to win. But you've got your stack Graveyard, it's still there, and you still have some cycling fodder there as well. Like, he's still in a good spot, even missing that land drop. I still think the mulligan aggressively is working out in his favor.
Absolutely, yeah. To say that he loses missing the land there is definitely a little exaggeratory. It's got some time there to resolve the Living End. But it does look like Jeremy has an Ashiok, so those creatures might be going away.
Yeah, that is not the card you want.
And I love this trick. So, does not matter who Ashiok's targets to mill the 4 cards. It is each opponent exiles their graveyard, so you can target yourself, put a bunch of creatures in there for the potential Living End that Howie has, and Howie's graveyard's still gone.
I've seen people do that in out of like Murktide. They'll pour that in, they'll target themselves to give themselves Delirium, or add more fodder for Murktide. Being able to hit Living End, their top of their library, not terribly important. Maybe you get lucky and do exile the Living Ends themselves, but once again, they can still win in spite of that. So I do like targeting yourself here if you're Jeremy.
Oh yeah, and Jeremy got paid off. He did hit a Bloodbraid Elf Ragavan, so if Living End does resolve, then Howie does have to play through those cards.
Yeah, that's like the other underrated thing, right? We kind of saw this in game 1. Like, the big catch-up mechanic is Living End, right? You can either use it aggressively or defensively. If you use it defensively, that's great, but like if it doesn't do anything, then kind of awkward.
Yeah.
And Jeremy stocking his graveyard for that post living end scenario, is in a really good spot if things don't go his way.
Yep. And so we see Jeremy also play a Dark Confidant and then send it back over to Howie, who had activated a Waker of Waves. And Howie did finally find that land. We'll see if he also found another Cascade spell, because Jeremy had taken one with his first Thoughtseize.
I mean, with such a low life total now, though, especially having a shock in that breeding pool, even if you have the mana to cast a Cascade spell, like, you're still on such the back foot that maybe it doesn't work out. Like, I think if you do have the Cascade spell, you're going to do it now before they have the Ashiok activation.
Mhm. So, yep. Exactly that. We resolve the living end, put those 3 creatures back in play, and then Shardless Agent resolves, and Jeremy got his Ragavan and Bloodbraid Elf.
Yeah, this isn't bad. I mean, at this point, we've got the board is definitely in Howard's favor. Ashiok isn't going to do anything meaningful at this point. Now that the threats really wanted are back into play. I mean, the whale bit being able to put the Strip Winder into the graveyard was a huge hit.
Very true. So we'll see what Jeremy wants to do here. I believe just thinking in his first main phase. So we are going to activate Ashiok, target ourselves, notably milled over a Grist.
Yeah, Chris would certainly be nice here. I'm not sure what Howard or how Jeremy is looking for. Like, I don't know what the best case scenario is. It's hard to deal with all these creatures. We're not seeing anything like Damnation or anything like that in the deck. We do have a new follower. Thanks for the new follow. So we are looking to see if there's anything else that might be able to turn this game around, but it's a really rough spot for Jeremy here.
Oh, yeah. So Jeremy not finding an angle other than just playing the Blood Crypt tapped, sending it back to Howie. See what Howie's got. Howie's going to attempt to fly the Waker of Waves, triggering the Curator of Mysteries.
Call me old fashioned, but I feel like when whales start flying, the game's probably over. I mean, that's gonna be a decent clock. I think it puts you in a position where you could probably close this game out over 2 turns. The Waker of Whales, Waker of Waves, going in the air. I think you're definitely incentivized to keep back your other creatures as blockers, just in case there is some dash threat, like another, let's say, Bloodbraid Elf or something like that might be problematic. I like this attack with just the Waker here.
Yep. Also got the Raging Ravine sitting in play. So there are 3 attackers at least next turn.
And it's very easy to just make a misstep here. Like, one fetch land, one cycle of a Street Wraith, and suddenly you're dead to Lightning Bolt. So Howie needs to be cognizant of that as we progress through this turn. It doesn't look like there's a Force of Negation, so you are, at the will of the top deck, or whatever's in Jeremy's hand. And at this point, we still don't know what that is.
Yeah. So, what's Jeremy thinking about here? Believe we're still before blockers or damage with the Waker coming in.
Yeah, I mean, you can't block here, right? So, potentially there's a Terminator or something like that in Jeremy's hand, debating if this is the spot you want to use it. We're at this point, we're at 7 minutes left in the round, so you're hoping that whatever the play is, you do it soon enough that you can close this game out. I think from Jeremy's position, if you are going to win this game, it's going to be a slog to get back there. Potentially, of course, double Lightning Bolt makes the game pretty quick.
Yep.
But if we're going to have to go through the red zone in order to win this game, I think it might be a decent amount of time. So hopefully, whatever play we make here is pretty quick.
So it looks like we are paying 4 mana to kick our tear asunder.
That is a card I did not expect to see brought in. I mean, like something that does deal with Leyline of Sanctity, but it's a great card that kick on that, being able to actually deal with cards like that. And I believe it actually exiles, if I'm correct. But
there we go.
Makes its way to the exile zone. That is a really huge play. I mean, that's nice. And the fact you already had 4 mana up means you actually used all your mana. It's not like you lost value. It's not like you had terminate mana and could have also cast like a Dark Confidant. We actually got to use all of our mana this turn, which is, I think, what Jeremy needs in this spot.
Yeah. Looks like we cycled Proving Ground. And then we're going to activate Ashiok again. Pyromancer, Dark Confidant.
Yeah, not terrible hits, not the best, but something. There's nothing like a show of strength of the main phase cycle. And that's how I know I'm winning this game.
Yes, it is either the largest show of strength or the biggest show of weakness. Yeah.
And now we're in the spot too where I'm interested to see if Howard is going to attack in the air or is going to attack the Ashiok. And it looks like attacking Jeremy, which is very aggressive.
But there are multiple violent outbursts still in his hand, so I think he knows that anytime he's threatened, he can just kind of put that spell on the stack and clear the board. Little insurance policy.
And also, I guess, potentially, you don't even need to worry necessarily about getting it into the battlefield, right? Like, the violent outburst is going to be, at the very least, an extra couple damage. So if you can get Jeremy down to a position where, it would be, he's at 10 and it would be 8 damage in the air. It could be 10 with the violent outburst, not actually cast the living end.
Yep. Just choose to shuffle it in with the cards. I think it'll be especially impactful here. Like, I guess Jeremy knows about it, so he's not going to go to boot up his land. And we did remove the Waker, so they have their full power, those creatures. Tarmogoyf, notable mill over, and we saw a Spellbomb there.
Yeah, I mean, the path there is not what you want if you're Jeremy. I think in this spot, your options are very limited. You do need to be still aware of that creature on the ground, but it looks like we're actually going to be making those tokens.
Yep. So we block 1 with one of them, take 4, go to 6. And now we force Howie to violent outburst, right?
Yeah, I mean, if Howie doesn't have, if the Raging Ravine, it's actually a Den of the Bugbear. This is a lethal attack. You have no blocker, so this is a violent outburst. And if that's the case, Jeremy's going to be in a really good position because his graveyard is stocked while Howard has nothing here.
Right. Yeah, casting the violent outburst here is almost like a concession. So we drew off the Riverwinder so that we get something back.
I think this is kind of showing the impact. Oh, was that a...
Yeah, that was a Brazen Borrower. So that means that we're not dead.
Well, it's really awkward now, right? Because the Den of the Bugbear is 3 damage into the land still.
Right, yep. It just hit me that we can't actually target that with our Brazen Borrower.
So, that's... Okay.
Oh my goodness.
That...
So the endurance trigger is going to shuffle away all those creatures. And then Howie's going to get back stuff anyway.
And we're doing it at instant speed, so the Ashiok's not going to be doing anything here. Oh, no. Oh, this game was so locked up for Jeremy, and now Howie's just... I think Howie just gets it now.
Yup.
Wow. I honestly, I was 100% already signing the slip for Jeremy. I was like, good job. Congrats on making top 8. And it looks like Howard wins.
Yes. Impressive show by Howie there. And I think Jeremy is, Jeremy's a character. Might take his losses a little hard and enjoy his wins a little more than the next person out there. So hope he's doing okay through that one, because Howie had to have a very, very exact selection of spells there.